Hey, good morning, everybody. I want to kind of drop a part two of the last video that I had left. So, I just got out of work, UPS. I'm considered the night shift, 9 to 1:30, 2 o'clock, depending on if it's busy or not. Usually we get out 1:30. The video is going to be just really quick about something I had posted around a strike. This is not necessarily about a UPS strike. This is strikes in general. This is contract negotiations in general. So, just a little bit of background on the contract negotiation process. I have negotiated contracts with school districts, private and public employees, with different kind of entities, non-union, which is like worker co-ops. And I've also been certified by a university in contract negotiations. So here's a little bit of the way it goes. Usually what happens in a contract negotiations is you put out a survey to let folks know, for them to put their input on what they would want in a contract. Behind the scenes, the union is sending a notice that a contract is going to expire. You're trying to get dates together for negotiating, etc., etc. Before the surveys, you may have a bargaining committee made up of either stewards or, depending on the union, it might be just specific bargaining committee from different departments. What you try to do is have a voice from every department represented at the table. Some unions do that. Other unions, it's all stewards from whatever barns or facilities the contract is going to be from. So that's, you put out surveys. The surveys could be paper surveys. The surveys could be electronically now through an app or through some kind of Google Doc. That all that information gets put together to kind of put together some kind of mock proposal. Usually, the union will meet with the members to kind of give them what the results of the survey were. What's important on for the members as far as during contract negotiations, if it's language, if it's wages, if it's health and welfare, pension, etc., etc. During a meeting, during one of these contract proposal meetings, there might be suggestions that are made that haven't been made in these contract proposals. So the union reps or the leadership might write those down as well and take those at the table. Every contract is different. There's some contracts that are 50 pages. There's some contracts that are 500 pages. It all depends what industry. It also depends if it's specific to a small facility or if it's a national contract that oversees, facilities in different states. It all would all depend on, again, how many members it covers. If it's a small contract, usually what happens is the language doesn't really change all that much. Most of the language that's in the contract is usually carried over from years upon years, as long as the language is still relevant and working. The only changes are usually made to health and welfare, pension, sick time, or anything that has come up as far as any process or procedure that the members would want to see change. Those are the proposals that will be brought up across the table. When you're in the negotiations, it could be a small bargaining team. It could be a big bargaining team. You're going to sit across from the bargaining team of the employer, which usually makes up, it's usually attorneys or any person that there's some employers that will contract out their negotiations, so they'll bring in a negotiation specialist. And the first meeting, the first negotiation meeting, is usually to exchange pleasantries, talk about kind of the rules of negotiations, just kind of lay down the ground rules of how things are going to go. But that doesn't mean that the employer can give their first proposal at the table, or that the union can't give their first proposal. Usually, contracts are negotiated in sections, so the union's not going to give their entire proposal. They're going to start off with, let's say, for example, if if there's new classifications that they want the bargaining to be part of the bargaining committee. Let's say you work at a warehouse, and in this warehouse, they have forklift drivers, order selectors, janitors, but now they want to include clerical. They might have to, the union might have to put a proposal together that says they now want to recognize clerical employees as part of the bargaining committee. So that would be the first proposal that the union would give on the table for Section 1 recognition. The employer could look at it and say, look, I don't have a problem with it. It looks good to me. We agree on it. And then that part becomes a tentative agreement. The employer will probably never say, they won't receive a proposal and say, oh, that looks good. What's going to happen is they're going to say, okay, we'll take a look at it. And then they'll go back in caucus, or for the next meeting, they'll have their answer. They could either agree on it, which would be a tentative agreement, or they could submit a counter proposal, which is we feel that, okay, we add clerical, but maybe we take janitors away, et cetera, et cetera. So they could counter propose, and you can go back and forth, as long as till you get a stalemate. All these proposals and counter proposals are numbered to make sure that you're keeping track of them. They're usually kept in a folder. And as it goes along, you're working together, getting tentative agreements on different parts of the contract. Usually, anything with wage and hour, which is wages and health and welfare or pension, is left for last. You try to knock out stuff that you mutually agree upon. Most of the conversations happen at the table, but sometimes there is sidebars between the lead negotiator from one side, the lead negotiator from the other side. I know some members don't like that sidebar and that, those extra conversations because they think they're getting sold out. It happens, but as long as there's transparency from the negotiating committee on exactly what they expect from whoever's chairing the negotiations, there's not a problem. Maybe the negotiator from the employer is more comfortable coming to an agreement and in a sidebar instead of a whole big room. As long as you're getting to exactly where you need to go, and as long as the negotiating committee is getting that transparency from whoever's chairing for the union, as long as you get there, it's a process. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get, we call it win-win, which both sides leave the table feeling that they didn't give up too much. Which would be the employer, and the same thing with the company. You're trying to meet somewhere where the employer comes to the negotiations with the line in the sand, where they don't want to go over this line, and the union negotiating committee, they want to get to that line, either cross that line if they can or get as close as they can. So at the end of the day, you get a contract that is beneficial for the membership, and that has a high probability of being ratified. Now, that doesn't mean that a proposal won't come across the table that maybe the negotiating committee feels will be ratified and it gets turned down. It happens all the time. But when it gets turned down, that's the job of the negotiating committee to say, look, Mr. Employer, the ratification vote, the membership voted no, so let's continue. Let's set up more dates to continue the process to see what we need to do to either tweak it or get exactly what we want. The employer could turn around and say, yeah, I agree with that. We're close. Let's figure out a way to get where we need to get to. Or the employer could say, look, no, we don't want to negotiate. We feel that we presented a fair offer, and they might present to the company, present to the union a last, best, and final offer, which is, look, this is all we're giving you, take it or leave it. If the union membership ratifies it and takes it, well then, you got a tentative agreement, and then it's all about sending it to get proofread to make sure that there's no errors, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it's proofread, it's printed, everybody gets copies. Usually retroactivity is involved, so you're going to get retro checks, etc. If the employer presents a last, best, and final, and the membership turns it down, then usually when they're presenting when the union is presenting a last, best, and final, they're also sometimes they'll do a strike vote before or after. Once that strike vote gets into happens, again, the union will reach out to the company again and say, look, the membership turned it down, and they also voted overwhelmingly to strike. The employer could turn around and say, yeah, that's, you know what, let's get some more dates. Or the employer could say, hey, tough luck. You know what, do what you got to do. At that point, if a strike is called, it's not only going to be through your local. It's usually through the big body, the big governing body of your union. So it might be, for the Teamsters, it might be the international. For others, it might be a bigger chapter or division that makes that call and says, yeah, you know what, the strike is authorized and we support your strike. Or that big body could turn around and say, look, your members are getting a contract that is in line with what the other industries are. You guys got to try to make this happen. There's plenty of times that as a member, I was in a group where we wanted to strike and keep striking, and we were basically told, no, look, you have a great contract. If we bring a federal mediator or we bring somebody else in, a neutral party, they're going to tell you that this contract is great, and you do end up going back to work. It's happened. So if there's a strike, most, not all, unions have a strike fund. A strike fund is overseen by a strike fund committee. The strike fund committee will meet and decide how much you would get per week to keep the strike fund solvent, but also so you won't starve. Sometimes the international or the top governing body will also give you strike benefits, but it's not going to equal what you make a week. So that's why it's very important that people save money. We always tell people at least a year in advance, save $20 from every paycheck if you can. Don't make any big expenses. Get your finances in line at least a year before contract time comes. Because if you're going to be out on the street, remember, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So if you have a group of members that's solid, but then you have a group of members that is struggling financially, that weakness will be felt on the line. So what you want to do is have everybody prepared. Again, some locals have a strike fund, so you'll be eligible for those strike benefits from your local. And then if there's an international or a higher governing body or joint council, you might get them from there. But again, it's not going to replace what you make. It's only a percentage. It's not going to replace what you're making per week. Now, another thing too is that if you are currently on a day shift and you're working your strike line on day shift, you could work on an afternoon shift or a night shift somewhere else. Being on strike doesn't mean that you can work somewhere else. So if you plan it out right, you could be on strike on day shift and work a part time somewhere else, and kind of supplement your income. It's all about getting yourself prepared for. It may be a long fight. It may be a fight that's going to last 2 weeks. If you're in an industry that um, impacts people and government and the workings of government, your strike's not going to last more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Um, if you're in an industry that has no big impact, I mean, the company's going to try to keep you out as long as possible. There's been strikes that have lasted for a really long time because it just comes down to, all right, who's going to blink first? When it's something that impacts the government or impacts the lives of the public, the government usually gets involved, and what they'll do is, look, we're gonna figure out a way to get you guys on the same page. Have your members go back to work while we work through this. So just because there's a possibility of a strike doesn't mean you're gonna see a strike, but it's also important to prepare yourself for if there's a strike. Again, I always tell everybody, look, save $20 from your check if you can. $10. I know times are tough. It sucks. Pick up extra hours. Pick up overtime if you can. Pick up extra shifts if you can. Start saving up. If come contract time, the contract gets ratified and you don't hit the street, there's no strike, you just build yourself a nice little vacation fund, or go buy yourself a recreational toy, buy another car, do something, fix your house or whatever you want. Um, and if there is a strike, you know that you're not gonna be in a position where you're gonna be worried about how to make ends meet or how to feed your family. Um, Many people have asked me, can I collect unemployment while I'm on strike? The only way you could collect unemployment is if the company locks you out. Lockout basically means the company feels that maybe you're going to be at work and you're going to sabotage things because you're going to be angry. So what you're going to do is you come into work and they have the gates locked and they're saying nobody, you're not going to work. Then you could apply for unemployment because you're locked out. When you're on strike, a lot of the procedures, you don't have the same protections. So if you do anything illegal on the picket line, you can be terminated for it. So it's important for you to know that you gotta watch what you do during the strike time. I've seen many Teamster brothers and sisters in my days that have been terminated for strike line activity. So you got to be careful. But again, it's important. It's important to know that if you are locked out, you can collect unemployment benefits. But again, it's. I've been through 3 strikes. They're definitely something that I'm always going to look back and cherish, because I felt that made us stronger as brothers and sisters, seeing each other out there with the solidarity, being out there on strike. Those were great experiences to really see the power of a union. So again, that's just a little bit of things that I wanted to just cover about upcoming contract negotiations, possible strike, lockouts. And again, usually what I do is I'll put my email, which is teamsteralex896@live.com, teamsteralex896@live.com, or on Twitter at LALiving213. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them. Again, for all my brothers and sisters at UPS, our contract is quickly coming up. Prepare yourself. It's nothing to be worried about. Um, it's going to be fun. It's going to be an adventure. And when we fight, we win. So just stay safe at your workplaces, and have a good one.